1 second here.
There you go.
There we go.
Make sure you try to mute yourself if you're not speaking, because it really does reduce the background or the echo. Yeah, after that, just try to use the hand up or wave your hand if you've got a question, because we really do want to hear. Do we have anyone from the public here today? General public? Yeah, John Cote. Okay. John, can I just ask where you're from? What community? Mute, unmute.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I work with Jim at the RDOS.
Okay.
I live out in Area I, but I'm just here because I find it generally interesting.
Okay.
Call me crazy.
Primarily from a staff perspective then, if you're not in Area D.
Yeah, just to see how the process works.
Good. Okay, thanks, John.
No problem.
Okay, moving on then. Can I have a motion to accept the agenda as circulated? Okay, I've got Bob Daly and Carrie McLean. Great to have you with us today, Carrie. Any discussion, any other items? Okay, I'll give everybody full notice. If you saw the action items in the minutes, and so just verifying that we do actually look at the minutes. One of the items was that we would endorse the service and boundary configuration study for the next meeting. So, the point there is that we've kind of gone into quite a bit of detail about the degree to which cost is addressed and the process, et cetera, for this project and work plan. And I'd like to address that point and from my perspective, put it to bed. So I'll be looking for, or I would certainly welcome a motion at the end of the consultant session, indicating that we're comfortable with this work plan, method of approach, et cetera. Okay, forewarned. So is there any other discussion points? Go ahead, Phyllis. Unmute.
I was looking at all the attachments that we were sent, and particularly the last one that talks about what services we receive from the RDOS, depending on what community we live in. And I had some concerns and some feedback that I wanted to pass along. Okay. And I don't know where that fits in.
I think the consultant's going to be going through all of these attachments in some detail. Is that correct, Alan? Okay, Phyllis?
That's correct. Yeah, thanks, Matt.
Okay, so when we get to that point, and we're going to go through each of those attachments, Phyllis.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Okay, and while we're talking about that, I guess I'll just, I'm not sure that we want to wordsmith every word of these documents. There's an awful lot there. I think we want to try to confine ourselves to the big picture. How are the issues framed? Are we asking the right questions? Are we not asking some questions? I think the consultants would probably welcome if anybody really does want to take a red pencil and make some heavy duty suggestions that would tighten things up if they feel they could. But I think that's probably something that could be done offline. Okay. And the next round of revisions for these will be looked at by myself and Bob, as well as staff, before anything gets finalized, and it'll be brought back to the committee in any event. Okay. So any other discussion points? Okay, great. I'll call the question. All those in favor of accepting the agenda as circulated, Okay. Any opposed? Carried. Okay. We've got the minutes for the last meeting, August 18th. Got a staff recommendation that the minutes of the September 8th. Yeah, let's get that straight. Should be minutes of the September 8th meeting be received. Can I have somebody make that motion, please? Okay, I've got Phyllis, seconded by. All right, we've got Eleanor. I'll take Eleanor. Thank you. Any discussion on these? Any comments, questions, concerns, oversights? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of accepting the minutes as received? Okay, any opposed? Seeing none, that motion's carried. Okay, now, you've seen the package. It's fairly, getting fairly heavy. Ron, as an Area D director, will tell us that this is light and he's used to receiving 185 pages the night before. But, you know, frankly, I found it quite a bit of reading material. I found it really informative. You know, the consultants are going to take us through this. For anyone who's been in this committee in a previous iteration, i.e. the governance study, you'll have seen documents quite similar to these fact sheets. For any of you that are still going to be around, if and when we get to doing the incorporation study, we'll be looking at another iteration of those fact sheets at that point as well. So these things are base documents. And then the other documents, the diagrams, etc. So I'm going to turn it over to Alan and Sherry. They're going to walk us through an overview of that. And Alan, how do you want to handle questions? I think I'll leave that to you. Okay.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Chair. I think what might be most helpful for questions is when we get to kind of the point of each, we'll go through each handout and then perhaps questions at the end, and we'll make sure to leave plenty of time for those. Let me share my screen if I may.
Okay. Just before you get started, Alan.
Yep.
Ron, you've got a question. Hello, Ron.
I'm so sorry. When Alan changed the screen, the mute button moved away from where it normally is, and I couldn't find it. I've got a text message from Kurt Hebert. Kurt is in Upper Carmi, and Kurt has had problems joining our meetings consistently. And again, he has Starlink satellite. You know, internet connectivity is one of our issues in our rural area. We have a big issue. I don't know if staff can help, but if I can encourage him to phone in. We had a problem with him last night at the APC meeting. He was the chair. I ended up using my speakerphone, but is there anybody who can help?
I think we've got it, and I think we've got staff here and they can follow up with Kurt. Crystal, I think you or Christy can contact Kurt. Do you have his phone number? I've got his phone number and I'll forward it to you. Okay, thanks, Ron. Can I flip it back to you now?
Okay.
Alan.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. So let's jump into the slides here. We've got, as the chair mentioned, we've got a bit of a packed meeting this evening. We've got some documents to go through with you. We're going to cover a few points. We're going to start with looking at the revised speaking notes, and then we'll move into flow charts, looking at the incorporation study process, the broader process, and where we fit into that process. We've then got 5 fact sheets that we'll talk about, 5 different services or areas of service, and 1 incorporation insight sheet. And then finally, we'll end with some items for SCAHA Matters updates. And as we noted already, as we go through each document, we will pause at the end of each and leave plenty of time for questions, to answer any concerns, or to respond or receive any input from the committee. let's just move forward. I'm going to get Sherry to start with the speaking notes.
Thank you, Alan, and Chair and committee. The speaking notes, I just made we made some revisions based on comments last time. There were a few minor updates, and Kay, I'll shout out and thank you for sending me some very helpful wording suggestions. One of the main things we wanted to do was include something about costs. So we did add a line, a bullet point there, and I don't know if this is something that is, I'm just gonna move, see if I can find, escape out of, oh, there it is. Okay, so included a bullet there just that mentions that the cost impacts of incorporation are typically or are calculated based on defined incorporation study boundary and the associated assessment base. Cost impacts will fluctuate based on different boundary scenarios. While the boundary analysis will consider assessment base as one criterion, detailed cost impacts of each boundary scenario are outside the scope of this study. High-level cost impacts that would result from incorporation will be noted as part of the individual fact sheets. So that's something that's been included in the speaking notes. And then the one other thing that we highlighted in here that was mentioned last time with respect to the speaking notes is that we'd like to include details on where the neighborhood meetings are going to be. So I'm not sure if the committee wants to provide some ideas or input on that now. We had suggested 5 areas as part of our proposal, but certainly defer to the committee on knowing the areas better and knowing where they would like those meetings to be. So if there's anywhere specific they would like to add or change, we're happy to receive input on that as well.
Hi, it's Phyllis. Can you tell us where you you proposed them again? Because
Yeah, fair enough. The Okanagan Falls, Upper Carmi, the Heritage Hills, Vintage Views area, Skaha Estates, and then one in Vaso Lake or surrounding area.
Okay, we definitely want one here.
So again, if there's anything that anyone wants to see anything different in the speaking notes, or if anyone wants to share any input on where, if we need to refine those neighborhood meeting areas, we can come back to it. But again, if we want to have that in our speaking notes and then start to get that information out there, then we should be including all the areas that we're intending to hit.
Oh, and looks like we have the chair who would like to ask.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, under your purpose, I don't know, when I read that third item, it just sounds a little academic to identify preferred boundary configurations for any subsequent incorporation study. To me, it seems like you've already told us you're only identifying one. So could we not say to identify the preferred boundary configuration for, I don't know, just like it's more specific?
Yeah.
We're not going to be identifying multiple options, right?
Oh, I see. And it sounds like we will be. Is that what you?
Yeah.
So, oh,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, we're only identifying one.
Okay.
So we are going to
well,
identify a boundary option.
Okay.
I thought we said we were going to identify up to 2.
Yeah, I don't know that we are necessarily. I mean, we might have 3 different options, and the committee's preference is one of them. Option A kind of thing. So I don't know that we want to rule out.
All right, cool.
But
that's good. Good. That's it for me.
Okay. Let's move on. If there are no other thoughts on that, then we can talk a bit of, yeah, go ahead, Sherry.
Sorry, Anne. So are we comfortable with the 5 areas that have been identified so far, or or we will advertise that we're going to have neighborhood meetings in those 5 areas. And then if we want to add anything else later, we can. I just know that the committee had said last time that they'd really like in the speaking notes to refer to those neighborhoods where we're hoping to hold meetings. So if I hear nothing else, I'm happy to go with the 5 that we had mentioned, but
I'm raising my hand, but I don't think anybody can see me.
Yeah, we can see you there. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, just further to that question, Sherry, I think those 5 areas are excellent. My question, and I think this is maybe a detail that needs some attention, is we have many areas that are not in those 5 areas. So we have Sun Valley, we've got Rolling Hills, we've got McLean Creek Road, we've got Parsons Road, we've got communities and Straths that are, I don't know how you're going to communicate with them all, because some of them have very bad connectivity. They're not going to get good communication. So, but I think in the spirit of inclusivity, those people count just as much as the people in OK Falls and Heritage. And so although I appreciate the 5 areas, what I'm thinking is when you look at our total map, there has to be a way for people in those other areas to know that they're welcome, and you know, perhaps they're welcome to more than one meeting. There's an area between Heritage Hills and Skaha Estates. Those people, do they go to both? Do they go to none? And so on. So I don't know what your thoughts are, but that's my question. You know, how do you deal with that to make sure everybody is included?
Thank you very much. That's an excellent point. And to be honest, people are welcome to go to any of the meetings. They're all open to everyone. I think the idea of the neighborhood meeting was to make sure that we are moving around and coming to the different areas across Area D, but not to exclude anyone from attending those meetings. So yes, if we want to describe them as and surrounding area, or maybe we just describe them as meetings that are, and we're just holding them in those communities, but not that they're exclusively for those communities. Yeah, I welcome input on that, but really it was.
Yeah, my input is on communication. Might be real good to focus on everybody welcome.
Yeah.
All meetings, and there are 5 locations.
Exactly. Yeah.
Near you, come once, come all.
Yeah. Attend all of them.
I think the communication and inclusivity is real important here, or else you're already kind of pre-selecting outcomes, because what I've heard in the past is people don't feel welcome and included, and I don't think anybody deserves to feel that way. So that's the suggestion. I don't know how you handle it, but those are my thoughts.
Sure. Great. Any other comments from anyone? Alan, can you see? Does anyone else have?
I don't see any other hands. No.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. Let's move on then if we could. And we're going to talk about the process graphics. And we've got 2 options here.
Right. Yes. So we made some adjustments to the graphics. We also we added, I guess one of the main things we added is sort of where we are now, and added reference to the actual study that we're doing now. So it wasn't just a process that we haven't even started yet and may never get to. I've created 2 different options that essentially communicate the same information. But one of the things I just thought that people might have a preference for one or the other. And actually in the back of my mind was also thinking about whether if we wanted to use this in Skaha Matters, a different format might be better rather than this one's in the horizontal format. And Alan, if you just flip to the next slide, the other one's slightly a bit more of a vertical process, but I tried to incorporate again some of the comments that we had last time about referencing the current study, and not so much a generic process, but sort of our study and where we are in that process. So, but again, we'll welcome any comments or how you'd like to see it changed. I think the intention is to post one of these on the website. Again, and if we can use one in SCAHA Matters at some point, that might also be helpful.
Phyllis.
I just wanted to say that I prefer the first one. I find it much easier to read than the second one. It's quite clear to me, and I really thought it was well done. The only thing that I would like to see is just somewhere on there, the attention to the year. And so people don't mix this up with something that's, you know, sometimes you go on a website, people don't always keep them current. So otherwise, I think it's good. I like the first one.
Any other thoughts? Yes, Mylene. And we'll just take you off mute there. Great.
I would just suggest the first 5 boxes that the second word be capitalized, like request study, create committee, pair options, that second word is capitalized. And I do agree that this first visual graph is great. I would choose this one over the second one. And again, year as well, I agree.
Excellent. Any other thoughts on that? Everyone comfortable with that first one with the changes suggested? Okay, thank you very much. Let's move on if we could then and get into the fact sheet. So what we try to do with the fact sheets, we've got, and I'll start, Sherry and I are going to kind of ping pong back and forth here so that we don't bore you too much with one person speaking too much here. So which usually is me in most cases. So Sherry's going to handle 3 of them and I'll handle 3 of them. We've got, excuse me, we've got actually 5 fact sheets and then we have an incorporations insight paper. So one of the fact sheets deals with the regional governance overview. And then we've got a number of different services, service-related fact sheets. And each of the service-related fact sheets kind of covers a couple of key or a few key items. And you'll note as you go through them that they all both look and follow the same kind of common format. So we talk about what are the services provided on that that are profiled on the particular fact sheet for that area of service. We look at who makes decisions in the services, and we kind of explain how those decisions are made and who makes those. We look at delivery of the service and who's responsible for delivery. We look at what's spent on the service. So what does the service cost to provide? And then importantly, how are costs recovered? We look at how those costs would be recovered. And looking then at that impact on a typical residence. And what's really important at the end here, and this is what we talked about in some length with the committee in our last meeting, is at the end of every service fact sheet, and indeed at the end of the regional governance overview sheet, we look at what would change at a high level as a result of incorporation. Now, we don't get into a detailed look at cost implications because, as we talked about last time, we don't know what those are going to be yet because we don't have the specific boundaries. Oh, we've got somebody coming in here into the meeting. I hope this is our missing member. Let's just give me a second here and we'll just make sure that we've got everybody accounted for. Hello? Here. Can you hear me? Oh, we can hear you. Yes, thank you. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Sorry, I had a meeting yesterday that I had a challenge getting into as well, and they wouldn't let me in, so I had to join by phone. But it's Kurt Hebert here.
Hi, Kurt. Thanks for joining us. And if you're okay by phone, then that's perfect. And just if you have questions as we go through and we ask for questions, please, since I can't see your hand, please just speak out and I'll make sure that we get you on the queue, in the queue.
Great. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt in the middle of the meeting.
Nope, not at all. We're glad you joined us. Thank you. So anyways, I noted we're going to, at the end of every sheet, we will talk about that high level kind of change that we would expect to see or that we could see as a result of incorporation. So let's kick right off and we'll start with the regional governance overview. So this one, it is an overview as a note, and in terms of who makes decisions. So when we look at regional districts, we've got, first of all, what is a regional district? Let's talk about that just very briefly. We're going to go through it a fairly good clip here because we have 6 sheets to go through in total. So a regional district, as some of you will know, is is a kind of a regional, is part of the local government system. It is a regional jurisdiction that includes electoral areas and member municipalities. So every municipality in British Columbia belongs to one of 28 regional districts. Every regional district also has at least one, and in many cases, many more than one electoral area. And in RDOS, you'll notice we have far more than one electoral area. There are, the only one actually with only one electoral area is Metro Vancouver, so our Greater Vancouver Regional District. There are 3 roles to regional districts. The first role is as the local government for the electoral areas. So Area D, its local government is the Regional District of Okanagan-Similkameen. The governing body is the Regional District Board. So the first role of a regional district is to be the local government for electoral areas and to provide local services to those electoral areas. Certain services must be provided at a local level to every electoral area. For example, local area planning has to be provided. Electoral area administration has to be provided. A few services like that are provided as the basic services to every electoral area by the electoral area's local government, the regional district. The second purpose of a regional district is to provide region-wide services, or sometimes what are called true regional services. These are services that include every jurisdiction of the regional district, all electoral areas and all municipalities. There are some services that are regional in nature that are mandatory. Very few those, so general government administration, for example, solid waste management planning, which we're going to get into as one of our fact sheets. A few services such as that are mandated or mandatory regional services. In many cases, though, regional services will be, or regional districts will provide regional services that all jurisdictions wish to participate in. And so those are voluntary services, but they're provided on a regional level. So the second purpose then is to provide those regional-wide services. And the third purpose is to provide sub-regional services, or more specifically, to be the framework within which different combinations of electoral areas and member municipalities can come together and choose to receive through the regional district, or provide through the regional district, receive from the regional district, different services to what we term sub-regions of the regional district. So local services, regional services, and sub-regional services. When we look at decisions, who makes decisions? So we have the regional district board of directors, and the board includes electoral area directors who are elected directly by electors in every electoral area, and they serve 4-year terms. And we have municipal directors, and municipal directors are appointed by their councils to sit as municipal directors on the regional district board. There are, and when we look at, oh, just a second here, let me just get in there. There we go. When we look at decisions, we look at different types of votes as well, how decisions are made. We've got corporate weighted votes and corporate unweighted votes, and we have stakeholder weighted votes. The unweighted corporate votes, that's 1 vote for every director. And corporate unweighted votes are done for things such as establishing new services. So those kinds of corporate concerns that have to involve every jurisdiction, in which every jurisdiction or every director has 1 vote. We also have corporate weighted votes and stakeholder votes. The weighted votes, every director who participates in a weighted vote, and in a corporate matter, it's all directors, in a stakeholder matter, it's only participating area directors. Every director who participates in a weighted vote has the number of votes accorded to him or her based on the population of his or her area. And we have what's called a voting unit, and the voting unit in the RDOS is 1,800 people. So for every 1,800 people, a director gets 1 vote. So Director Obrecht then for Area D gets 3 votes, because we've got about 4,200 people in Area D right now. And so that equates then to 3 votes using our voting unit. Now, one of the key, or perhaps the key takeaway for regional district voting is that for an electoral area such as Area D, is that in every case, decisions made for Area D involve at least 1 other director, at least 1 other elected official from another jurisdiction. Now, it could be several directors from other jurisdictions, or in some cases, it could be just one, depending on the service and depending on the question being asked. But we don't have any cases in which only the director for Area D makes those decisions for Area D. They always involve at least some or one other representative from another area. And that's one point that distinguishes or sets electoral area governance apart from municipal governance, which we'll talk about in a moment. Services provided. So, I'll just mention in terms of decision making as well, of course, the public has a role. We've got the role through direct consultation on matters. We've got the role through advisory planning commissions, or in Area D's case, not only a planning commission, but also a Parks and Recreation Commission. And we've got direct elector approval for different kinds of decisions, financial and borrowing decisions, but also decisions related to the establishment of new services. And the provincial government plays a role in making decisions over key services, policing, roads, subdivision being those primary ones. Now, what services are provided? Well, in most cases, it can be whatever the electoral area residents need and wish and desire the region to provide on their behalf. Some services must be provided. We talked earlier about local area planning, administration, solid waste management, and so forth. We've got a few mandatory services, but in most cases, it is what residents either through their electoral area director will look to the region to provide services that are needed in the electoral area. Not provided relates back to what I noted earlier with the province: police, roads, and subdivision. Those are provincial services not provided by the regional district in electoral areas. How do they pay for services? Well, as you probably know, because you're all taxpayers in an electoral area, when you look at your tax notice, you'll note that every service has its own line. So in an electoral area, including general governance, so in an electoral area, we don't have a general tax and we don't have a general revenue. We have individual taxes and individual revenues for each service. So every service has its own account, and those accounts are firewalled from one another. So the costs and revenues that are related to every specific service must be kept in that service account or with that service budget. And so we see then all of the different services have their own budgets. They're recovered using, in most cases, tax requisitions, or at least partly tax requisitions. And we have value tax, which is kind of what typically are referred to as property taxes, and they're based on the assessment of your property. And then we also have parcel taxes, which are another form of property tax, but they tend to be uniform by parcel across an area. We have user fees and charges as well for things such as water systems, sewer systems, garbage, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the program. And one other point to note with respect to paying for services is that in a regional district, all of the taxes are actually collected by the provincial government on behalf of the regional district. So the surveyor of taxes for the province collects and sends out the tax notices, collects that money from landowners, from residents, and passes that back to the regional district to pay for the services. And the province, the surveyor charges 5.25% service fee to for that service to the regional district. So you'll notice then that there is a charge on your taxes with embedded in every service for that to pay for that provincial service. Okay, let's talk about how it would differ in a municipality. Some key differences. First of all, in a regional district, we have the regional district board of directors as the local government. I noted that already. In a municipality, we have the municipal council. The municipal council makes all local decisions for the community, for the municipality, with the exception of some services that would still be provided by the regional district and some services that would still be provided by the province, in particular policing, up to a certain population at least, but policing. There are, excuse me, there are, the size of council is dependent on a number of different factors, including the geographic size of the area and the population of the area. But for Area D, it would either be a 5-person council, 1 mayor and 4 members of council, or a 7-member council, 1 mayor and 6 members of council. All of those elected officials would be They don't need to be, but in most cases, in every case but one in the province, they are elected at large, meaning that the entire community elects all members of council, including the mayor. The one case there where we have a ward system, which you may be familiar of or with if you've lived in other provinces or if you've looked at other provinces, a ward system. The one community in British Columbia where we have a ward system is the District of Lake Country. And so that's just a little bit of a tidbit, but in some cases through incorporation, there will be a transition whereby if the community is very diverse with different kind of parts of the community, there may be a transition for a few years where you have a ward system that transitions out into an at-large system. Now, so I've talked about then we've got the number of the councillors and the council and the mayor sitting on council. We've still got residents who play, or public that still plays a role. We can have an advisory planning commission. They're not as common in municipalities as they are in electoral areas, but we can have them. And we do also have elector approval, although not as in many cases as in electoral areas. So one of the key differences is in an electoral area, when the regional district wishes to provide a service, we need in most cases, we need elector assent for permission to provide that service. Not in every case, but in most cases. In a municipality, we don't need that assent. That is a decision made by council. Council can consult with residents, but that decision's made by council. We still have the regional district because, as I noted right at the outset, every municipality belongs to a regional district. So so every municipality does rely on a regional district for certain services. So there are some decisions made by the regional district board on which sits the municipal director. And we still have the province involved in some decision making for certain services. Okay, let me pause there, and that's a lot to take in over regional governance and regional district governance, but I'm happy to answer any questions or to take any comments from folks on that. Yes, Ron.
Thank you very much, Alan. I've got 3 comments. The first is thank you for a job well done. That was a lot of information, very well presented. I have 2 more comments, and these are important. Big difference between regional district governance and municipal governance is democracy, accountability. You heard Alan mention that the director for OK Falls, the only one that's elected from this community, is never voting alone on anything. And the theory that you're voting alone with one other director is very rare. I don't think I've seen it a single time in the time I've been on the board. What's more common is you're very lonely, 1 out of 19, 18 who don't live here, 18 you don't vote for, 18 you can't vote against. You've got 54 weighted votes. We have 3. Penticton has 19. When we look at accountability, every one of those people on your municipal council, they are voted for at large, which means you, the community, choose them, you vote for them, they're accountable to you at the next election, they live in the community, they pay the taxes you pay, they receive the services you pay. I mean, think about it. We've got 18 members on the budget bylaw who don't live in our community making that budget decision for us. And this is a really important distinction. And then the final comment is authority. And the authority that municipal districts have is just different. You heard Alan speak to 3 areas of authority: roads, police, and subdivision approval authority. I can tell you that under section 77.1 of the Land Title Act, we could by motion delegate subdivision approval authority to the regional district. No, not a single regional district in 56 years has done that. It's not hard. But so that's the small one. That one, I could talk for hours on that alone. But the municipal charter applies to municipalities. Municipal charter in the country of Canada. And I'm now quoting Don Lidstone, who I know Alan and Sherry and others will know, and Jim and Christy Malden. Don Lidstone is Lidstone and Company, a law firm that provides these legal advice to municipalities in the province of BC. according to him, and I believe him, the municipal charter in BC gives municipal government in BC the best system in Canada, better than all the rest. Unfortunately, regional districts do not have the authorities under the municipal charter or the benefits. So we have a contradiction or a paradox in that regional districts have a different system. Historically, when the Local Government Act was brought in, there was a lot of years of tidying up and fixing it because it wasn't working well. And the municipal charter was one of the outcomes of all those years of work. And I compare it to a house renovation where you renovate the first floor, but the basement still has a hole where the toilet's going to go and a sewer pipe sticking up with a rag. That's the regional district part of our governance, because the municipal charter never got finished when it came to the regional districts. In theory, it could be better. If we look at other provinces like Alberta, which have a county system, or Ontario, what you have is authorities that work. Sherwood Park is not a municipality, but it has all the authorities of the neighbor Edmonton, who is a municipality. It's different. And so those distinctions are really key. If you're really making a choice, it's good to know what the choice is. And that's the difference. That's what you're choosing. You're choosing democracy at a very effective level with more authority and different accountability. It's really quite a different system. But thanks for letting me speak. I appreciate the chance.
Yeah, and thank you. And we'll move on in a second unless we have some other comments. But just to pick up on Ron's points, excellent points, Ron. And I will say that yes, the democracy, the accountability in so many cases, and we've noted this in previous meetings, and it's worth just kind of emphasizing because Ron's kind of nicely pinpointed this. Governance is the deciding factor of these kinds of studies when we move into incorporation studies, and the desire to have decisions made locally by people elected from within and by the community often is kind of the deciding bit there. And then the authority part, which Ron noted too, is really a good point. I will note that the Don Lidstone, yes, I would agree with him. The community charter is extremely good and may in fact be the best. Don, however, was the primary author of the charter, so he's a little biased in that. Okay, anyway, let's move on. I don't see any other hands, and let's move on and go into something a little less esoteric, a little more kind of, you know, in the ground, as it were, both literally and figuratively. So sewer and wastewater. And I'll turn it over to Sherry for this.
Thank you, Alan. I wasn't sure what your transition was going to be to sewer, so thank you for keeping it clean. Okay, so sewer and wastewater. We have two primary services that we refer to in the fact sheet. The one being the Okanagan Falls Sewage Collection and Treatment Service. This is a service that's provided, as I'm sure many of you know, to a very specific sewage area, and we have a map in the fact sheet. So there's approximately 750 properties on that service, and just under 1,400 connections to that service. And we also talked about in the fact sheet the septic disposal service, which is a service that's offered through the Penticton sewage treatment plant, where you can dispose of your septic waste. We do also note in the fact sheet that there is a private sewer system, and that's in the Heritage Hills area, but that's not a service provided by the regional district. And so, yeah, we don't go into details about that service. Decisions on the Okanagan Falls Sewer Service are made by the full board, as Alan has highlighted in our regional governance sheet, and Ron has also pointed out. They are made by the full board because the service area lies entirely within one electoral area, and the system doesn't allow for one electoral area to make decisions on the service. So the decisions on that service would be made by the whole board, and the septic disposal decisions would be made by the directors from the participating areas for that service. The service is delivered, the Okanagan Falls Sewer Service is delivered through the regional district. They operate the sewer system and the treatment plant. Staff include some staff who focus on operations, as well as some other staff that focus specifically on capital projects. The septic facility is run by the city of Penticton through a long-term contract with the regional district. Costs of the service, we use the budget numbers and we will be consistently using the 2021 budget numbers throughout all our fact sheets. That budget will typically for a service include both operating costs as well as capital costs. Where that's quite obvious, we will separate the two because capital projects in any given year usually fluctuate, whereas the operating costs are more likely to be stable. So we do try and point out those two differences, but we will be quoting when we talk about the cost of a service, we will be quoting that budget number. And we do try and note in our fact sheets, as you will notice as we go through this process, where it's maybe an unusual year, or if there is an expenditure that would not normally be happening that shows up in that cost. So we try and note some of those anomalies as we go through this. The fact sheet also refers to the reserve accounts, and we will do this for every service area that we go through, identify what reserves are in place to address different expenditures. Often is an operating reserve as well as capital reserves. So we've noted those. How are the costs recovered? Sewer costs are recovered from user fees for those that are connected to the system. The regional district does receive an annual grant towards that as well from the water. I don't even have the sheet up. I'm just going from memory. The water basin.
Okanagan Basin Water Board.
Okanagan, thank you. That's what I'm looking for. They also collect DCCs, which are development cost charges from new development. So if you're developing a new home or adding on to a commercial area or a new commercial building, you pay a development cost charge, and a portion of that that goes to, or that development cost charge gets used towards capital works, I think specifically for the treatment plant. So they do recover some costs that way as well. There are no general taxes. Again, the sewer costs are through a user fee. It's a utility, so there's a user fee, and so it's paid for by those who are obviously users of the system. The septic disposal service actually doesn't have any cost right now. Previously, it was recovered through some tax requisition, but the RDOS no longer is raising taxes towards this service because the city and the service is actually in a surplus, and so no taxes are needed, which is why we show a zero as the cost of that service now. What else? So the cost to the typical residents obviously depends on where you are in Area D. If you are part of the sewer service, then you'd be paying your user fee, which in this case is $879 for a single family. And if you're not in the sewer service area, then you're not paying anything towards these services. What would the impact of incorporation be on the services? So as Alan sort of alluded to earlier, we've added this section for those of you who were part of the governance study and has gone through many of these fact sheets in the past. This is sort of a new section that is relevant for this current study. And so we are trying to note in here any changes in whether it be services, service levels, governance, or in cost. So anything that would happen as a result of incorporation, we are trying to note in this area. So in this case, the service and service levels would not change. It is expected that the any incorporation area would incorporate all of the sewer service area. So you wouldn't normally create a municipality and have that municipal boundary go partway through a utility service like this. It makes it very hard to manage, to finance. So one of the principles is normally that you would include all of the area in particular, a sewer service, because sewer is often associated with the ability of an area to grow. So we do anticipate that all of the service area would be contained within a municipal boundary. So that would change the governance system for a sewer in that the municipality would have authority over the service, and the infrastructure would be transferred to the municipality. Doesn't mean that the costs would change necessarily, but that the municipality would be the ones, the municipal council would be the one governing that service. The one thing, sorry, and this is no longer part of the sewer, this is part of every fact sheet that I do want to highlight, because it is one thing that we would like feedback from the committee on. In every fact sheet, we will have this, the chart that references the cost impact on a typical residence. And you may have noted that we've used the value so far in the ones that we've presented today. So a single family home assessed at $450,000. Area D, the average 2021 residential assessment per property is actually $466,048. So normally we use a round number, and we want to use something close to what the average would be, but you have to keep in mind that that's just an average residential property. So some of those properties may have homes on them, some of them may not, so that might bring down the average. So we want to provide a typical cost impact for something that means something to residents. Obviously not everyone's going to have an average property, but if we use a round enough number, then you might be able to get an idea of what your taxes would be in relation. So, you know, well, it's 450, my place is 900,000, it's probably double that. Or, you know, 450, my place is half that. So we don't really mind what the committee wants to use. Maybe if you guys can have some input on that, whether we go round up a little bit more, whether 500 makes more sense, whether 450 is the right number, 475. But I just wanted to highlight that, because whatever we use, we will use it for all of our fact sheets, so people can compare the cost of services. But I will stop there and see if anyone has any questions on the sewer and wastewater.
And Sherry, can I just ask, just before we jump in there, just with respect to the user fees for this particular service? I know we highlighted 450,000 just because we wanted to introduce that concept. Would those user fees be for all values?
Yes, it's the same
Okay.
user fee for a single family, regardless of the assessed value.
Gotcha. Okay. We've got Phyllis here first, and then Ron.
Okay, well, I have 3 questions. And my first question, I'm sorry if they're dumb questions, but I gotta ask them anyway.
No dumb questions.
So here at Vassal Lake, we have our own, we're required to have our own septic systems. And so I'm wondering, like in your outline there, like what services would be used by Vassal Lake? Is it because our septic systems are being pumped occasionally, like once a year or whatever, and that then goes to the treatment facility and it gets treated? Or what are we getting for our value, you know? And if the DCC cost is $5,900 and that's going towards capital works, and we don't have any system here, are we getting value for our dollars, for our tax dollars?
Okay. Good questions. Not dumb questions. There's no such thing. So you would, if you have a septic system and you get it pumped out occasionally, you're paying for that private service, and you're paying for someone to come and pump out your septic, and they are probably disposing of it, probably at the City of Penticton's facility, in which case when they're disposing of it, they're paying a user fee to dispose of it. So you are probably paying that user fee to them, plus for the service that you are receiving. None of those services, aside from, the regional district does offer the service through the City of Penticton to pump out your septic. So that service is available, but you aren't contributing any taxes toward that service right now. And you don't pay towards the Okanagan Falls sewer service because you're not in the sewer service area. DCCs, you would only pay if you're growing within the DCC service area. So the DCC service area will only apply to growth that hooks up to the, or has the ability to hook up to the Okanagan Falls sewage treatment plant. So you wouldn't even be paying even if you built a new home, if it's not it's not being serviced by that sewer system, you're also not going to pay that development cost charge.
Yeah, so this part of this fact sheet really doesn't
Apply to
people who live here, unless we were ever at some point going to
Connect
develop
you.
our own septic or our own sewer system out here.
That's right. And had this been done 2 years earlier, you probably would have seen a little tax amount for the septic disposal, because you would all be contributing to that service being available. In which case you could say, yeah, I know that we're using that through a private operator, but we do make use of that to pump out our septic system, and you would have seen an amount. But as of now, you guys aren't contributing taxes towards it.
Okay, thank you very much.
No problem.
Okay, we've got Ron.
Yes, and thank you. I wanted to draw attention to the impact Incorporation has on the cost of services. And the first sentence in the material is that it would result in many required changes, or perhaps any required changes when it comes to cost. And I want to speak to that because this is where there's a lot of confusion in the community. You pay for what you get, and that's the regional district system. And that's why Vassal Lake doesn't pay for a sewer they don't have. And that's why OK Falls pays for a sewer they have. If that sewer gets expanded and you have those DCCs and such costs, and those go into reserves, when that sewer gets expanded, there's some recovery to the total project, and there's economies of scale, which means the current users get a better price per unit of service, but the new users get a much better deal too than they would if they put in a brand new wastewater treatment service. And so what you end up with is the facility we have, which was from 2006, it was built with capacity to reach Kaleden and Skaha States, possibly Heritage Hills. And so as that service expands, there's real benefits here. And when you're on a septic system, you have environmental impacts, health impacts, and costs. And long-term, the costs of that sewer service can indeed even be lower than the septic system that people now have. Now, I know that gets a little complicated, but here's the bottom line. It doesn't matter if you're an incorporated community or not. That's the way it works. You pay for what you get. And once you're incorporated, you vote for the council that's going to make a change. So you don't have to be incorporated to raise taxes, and you don't have to be incorporated to lower taxes, but you can lower taxes or raise taxes. You can increase services or decrease services. But here's the key takeaway. Who are you going to vote for on your council? And those 6 or 5 people or 7 people, probably 5, 4 council, 1 mayor, they're going to have a sharper eye out for value than a board of 18 others who don't live here and don't have the same interest in that cost. And I speak to this now because when I've spoken about cost before, never once did I suggest we want to mislead the public with guesstimates that aren't accurate. I always meant that we speak at a high level. And so I really like that you're putting this into these fact sheets, because the takeaway is cost is really not a big variable. It just sounds scary. And so facts are how we counter fear. There's a lot of fear in the community. We have facts, and indeed we can look at other experiences, Clearwater, West Kelowna, and others, and we can look at what happened there, and that's for another day. But I want to mention this because we're going to see this pattern repeat through the other services. And after we get through the other services, I have some question about services that aren't in the fact sheets, and I have questions about those. Thanks.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Sherry, let's move on. And Sherry's up. She's going to talk about library.
Get through, yeah, library services. It's probably an easy one for everyone to understand, and they know what the service is about. So this fact sheet hasn't actually changed significantly since the last time we did it in 2016. So it's still the Okanagan Regional Library that provides library services. They provide library services to a very large area, including portions of 4 different regional districts. You guys probably already aware that Okanagan Falls has its own library branch. Interestingly, the Penticton Public Library is not part of the Okanagan Regional Library. They have their own municipal library system. Decisions are made. The Okanagan Regional Library, it is its own corporation. It has a 24-member board of trustees. The RDOS does have 1 director on that board of trustees. And so the RDOS isn't really responsible for running the Okanagan Regional Library. In fact, they only have that one director on the board. They are responsible, however, for approving and funding branch furnishings as needed. So that's really sort of the limited band of which within which the RDOS operates. The service is delivered by the Okanagan Regional Library staff. The cost of services to the regional district is on the chart there. It's about $886,000, and that amount is raised through property taxes. The property taxes that we're showing, Alan, if you can just switch to the next slide. I know we can go through library quite quickly. Again, we've used the typical residents here that by the end of the committee meeting today, I would like to confirm what number we'd like to use, but we've used $450,000. So a property assessed at $450,000 would be paying $66.61 towards library services. Incorporation, what would the impact of incorporation be? Really, there would be no change that would be required or that would automatically result from incorporation. The only change is that the municipality would have its own trustee on that board of trustees for the ORL if they chose to stay with the Okanagan Regional Library. A municipality could also choose to create a municipal library system instead and provide library services that way. That's like Penticton. Penticton's a good example of that. But yes, so the municipality would obviously weigh the pros and cons of doing so, the costs of doing so, and make a decision on that. But there would be no required change just because they became incorporated. The costs of library services to a municipality. So the costs get distributed to each of the jurisdictions based on a formula that takes into account population as well as assessment base. So until we know what the boundary is for incorporation, we can't quite say whether it would be, say, more than that $66 or a little bit less, a little bit more, because it will depend on what the population and assessment base would be. Any questions on library?
Okay, there's never any questions on library. So
that's the best fact sheet to do.
I know, it's why you chose that one. Okay, let's move on then if we could, and we'll talk now solid waste management. Yeah, garbage basically, but more than garbage, recycling and organics as well. So when we look at solid waste management in the area, first of all, let's talk about what services we've got. We've got 4 services in total. The first is curbside recycling and garbage collection. There are actually 2 different services within this kind of particular, there are 2 different curbside garbage recycling services in the area. One is Okanagan Falls specific, and the other is the remainder of Area D plus some other electoral areas as well. So in that service then, in both of those services, we've got weekly garbage, we've got every other week recycling pickup, we've got yearly pickup of yard waste, and we've got seasonal pickup of yard waste and a yearly pickup of large items. That service is only provided to single family households and to multifamily households with fewer than 4 units or 4 or fewer units. But anything above that in terms of multifamily and also all non-residential is responsible for its own curbside pickup or own garbage and recycling collection. And typically that is done through some kind of contract with a waste collection company. The other another service we have then is solid waste management. Solid waste management is a mandatory service of the regional district. Is provided to the entire regional district. That is, so it's one of those true regional services we talked about earlier. It involves kind of the preparation of the solid waste management plan, which is required by statute. Every regional district must have one of those. It's a long-term vision on how solid waste is going to be managed in the area. It sets out waste diversion targets. It talks about public education on the 5 R's and those kinds of things. So everybody must participate in that, as I noted. We've got landfill operations, which is kind of, where do we take the residual materials? Where do we throw out the garbage? Where do we landfill things? We've got 7 landfills in the area, including one in Okanagan Falls, the Okanagan Falls Sanitary Landfill. Now, that particular landfill in Okanagan Falls is not for residential waste, as you may know. That one is simply for demolition, land clearing, and construction materials. So it's important for that. Residential garbage that's collected through the curbside recycling and through, in multifamily cases from others, is taken to the Campbell Mountain landfill, which is north of Okanagan Falls. There is also adjacent to Campbell Mountain, there is a proposed organics composting facility that is not yet open, though it's proposed, and that's still under exploration, I understand. Finally, we've got a fourth service, which deals with illegal dumping, which is an issue in many rural areas of the province, and indeed in many cities, or kind of in the suburban parts of cities, typically. We've got reporting function in that service. We've got a collection of illegally dumped materials, and we've got support for various community cleanup efforts in that service. Okay, let's talk first, before we move on to cost, we'll talk about who makes decisions. So for the curbside service that we talked about earlier, it's the service participants who do that. So that could be, it is a contracted service, but the service participants of each of those will make decisions on those services. The board makes decisions for the solid waste management plan. That is the entire board, because it is a truly regional service that involves all members. And the participants, there are City of Penticton in 4 electoral areas, including Electoral D, make decisions for the landfill operations. In terms of delivering the service, so how is it staff, is it a contractor, and so forth. So for the curbside garbage and recycling, we have a private company, Waste Connections, that is contracted by the regional district to do that service. For the solid waste management plan and for the landfills and illegal dumping, that is done in-house by RDOS staff. Okay, let's talk a little bit about finances and what it costs. So when we look at finances, the fact sheet shows the different service costs. So the overall cost of providing the service. The figure in front of us really shows kind of the tax impact or the cost impact on a particular home. And again, we have chosen here our assessed, our typical home of $450,000, or our typical residential property of $450,000. And what we see here is depends on the different areas. So if you are at a curbside area for the curbside collection area for that kind of the rest of Area D and E, F, and I, it's $155 flat rate per household, irrespective of the value of that household. And that is paid as a user fee. Excuse me. We then have, if you're in the curbside area for the Okanagan Falls specifically, that's a little bit cheaper at $135. Refuse disposal, no cost on that. We've got solid waste management planning. Everybody in the region pays towards that. It is a high $3.24 on this particular household. That's because it's considerable economies of scale and it's not a huge requisition in the first place. And then illegal dumping, even cheaper at 60 cents. So we go anywhere from $139 to $159 on a house of this value, in the $450,000 house in our area. What happens in terms of incorporation? Well, no required changes. So when we look at the curbside collection and recycling, the municipality could say, we are going to take that over and we are going to do one of two things. We're going to provide or deliver that service in-house. And so we're going to have our own crews go door to door and we're going to invest in the trucks and all that kind of stuff. That probably wouldn't happen because the startup cost to get into that and the risks involved in that service are pretty significant, the potential risks at least. The municipality could then decide to do something else. They could say, we're going to do it ourselves, but we're going to take responsibility for the service, but we are going to use our own private contractor and have our separate contract with that company. They could do that. But what they could do instead is they could say, we are going to remain in this regional service, which services not only the new municipality, but other areas outside of the municipality. And we're going to stay in there because we're getting a pretty good price and there's some economies of scale in there. And we should at least stay in until the current contract elapses, and then we can assess our options at that point. When we look across BC, we see lots of different configurations on how this service is provided or how it's delivered. Where I'm based, just a little bit north of folks in the RDCO, the Central Okanagan, we have the regional district service for curbs using one region-wide contract for curbside recycling and garbage pickup. Kelowna, Peachland, Lake Country, and West Kelowna are all part of that regional service. So it is not uncommon for municipalities to work together with others through a regional service in that fashion. When we look at the other types of services, so solid waste management and illegal dumping, we wouldn't see any change in those cases because those are cases where we've got all electoral areas and all municipalities participating in those services. So we would not see, and in fact, we could not see a change in the solid waste management, and we likely would not see any change in the illegal dumping because, again, the economies of scale are pretty significant at the scale at which those are done. Okay, questions on garbage and recycling? Yes, Ron.
Sorry, it takes me a second to find the unmute.
That's all right.
I wanted to add, and I think this is a real good opportunity to make another point. And, you know, who makes the decision? Now, right now, your director has a vote at the board table on our service. On incorporation, nothing changes. It can stay identical. And your council, for council members and mayor, the practice is usually the mayor gets appointed to that board as the municipal appointment. And so you have all the protection that you have today at that board table on that regional service. So you lose absolutely nothing on incorporation when it's who makes the decision. It stays the same, and you have the same and possibly even better representation because your council is part of your local government, not just the one director. So in terms of what do you lose at the board table, you don't lose your seat, you keep your seat. You have all the regional issues. You are represented just as you are today, indeed, possibly better than you are today. And if you look at our system of regional district governance, very interesting, because if you notice, it's heavily skewed towards the municipalities. We have 10 municipal appointments. We have 9 electoral area. We've got, on the weighted votes, we've got 54 weighted votes, and 35 of those weighted votes are the municipalities. So when you become a municipality, you're part of a more interesting group at that board table. You lose nothing. And I think that's real key, because I think very few people in the community would understand that distinction. How does it change? You're losing nothing at the board table on this regional service, and that's real important to know.
Thank you, Ron. And I know that that you weren't, just to kind of clarify one point, and I know you didn't state this, but just in case anybody misinterpreted something there, I want to just point out that the weighted votes would not change for a municipality. You would still be subject to the same voting unit. So in the same way that Area D now has 3 weighted votes, depending on the size of any new municipality, you would have up to 3 weighted votes as well on that thing. So anyway, okay. Any other questions or thoughts or comments or ponderings on garbage and recycling? Okay, this is that's so how, yeah. Okay, I'm tempted to kind of try to say something witty about garbage and recycling, but I'm not gonna fall into, I'm not gonna risk that. So let's just move on to Parks and Recreation. This is the next one. So Parks and Rec, we're going through it a good clip. So thank you all for your rapt attention on this, because this stuff can be a little bit dry, but it is important stuff, and it's our role as a committee to make sure that everything in here is kind of reviewed and thought through, and we've got the high level impacts or implications sorted out, and all that kind of stuff. And before we go to the public with some of this material, let's talk Parks and Recreation. So what have we got in terms of park recreation? Well, we've got two services. First of all, we have the regional parks and trails. Many regional districts across British Columbia have regional parks and trails. They tend to be the larger natural areas, protected environmental features, trails, connecting communities to one another, that kind of thing. Everything that is bigger than or goes beyond the scope of an individual jurisdiction. Everybody pays towards those, everybody governs those, everybody acquires those, and helps to create that legacy for the region as a whole. We've also got Okanagan Falls Recreation Parks and Facilities, a separate service there. It includes most of Area D, but it also goes a little bit, actually, I think it includes all of Area D, but it goes a little bit into Area I as well. So there's the kind of the two regional districts, but mostly Area D on that. That particular service has a number of different things. It's got everything from kind of community parks to kind of different recreation programs, to ball fields, cricket pitches. Those cricket pitch, that's pretty impressive. Okay, lots of different things. We've got a skate park, we got a dog park, we've got Centennial Park in Okanagan Falls, which is actually owned by the Okanagan Falls Irrigation District. But there is an outdoor stage and a public washroom that were funded by the RDOS in there as well. So a little bit of kind of mixing and matching there from different jurisdictions. There is a chart, there's a map in the fact sheet there, which does show the service area for this particular service. And as I noted, it does go a little bit into Area I as well. So two different electoral areas overlapped in this, or kind of covered by parts of or parts at least covered by this service. We have, of course, in addition to both our regional park system and our community parks and recreation service, we also have some provincial, and we also have some private recreation facilities. Those are outside of our scope. Those wouldn't change irrespective of whatever happens with in terms of governance. When we look at making decisions, the regional park service regional parks and trails is the quintessential, some say, the quintessential regional service, in that it is very much focused on the needs of the broader region. It includes all jurisdictions of the region. So the full regional board makes decisions on those. When we look at the Okanagan Falls Recreation Parks and Facilities service, that service is we have two directors kind of involved in decisions and stakeholder decisions on that particular service. We have the full board making certain services on budgets, land acquisition, those kinds of things. But we also have two other bodies involved in governance. We have, first of all, a community services committee of the regional district board to look at kind of different decisions related to control of all public parks under a regional district service. And then more specifically, we have the Okanagan Falls Parks and Recreation Commission. So this is very important because it is a body made up of residents, of members of the public. The electoral area director for Area D, Ron, sits as an ex officio non-voting member on that particular commission, but we've 11 members of the public on this commission. And this commission provides advice and guidance on behalf of Okanagan Falls and the surrounding communities to RDOS on operational matters as they relate to parks and recreation. So a very important local commission. Operates within an annual budget provided by the board, and staff provide advice, RDOS staff provide advice and recommendations to the commission. And so they are involved in a big way in governance and decision-making for this service. When we look at delivery for the service, we've got kind of RDOS staff delivering the bulk of the service for regional parks and recreation. We've also then got, with respect to the Okanagan Falls Recreation Parks and Facility, we've got RDOS staff delivering that. We do have some contractor to do some things, custodial services, for example, on some of the facilities involved in that service, such as the Okanagan Falls Community Center and a few other items, a few other places in that particular service. So what is spent on this service and how does that all translate into tax implications for residents? When we look at it, we'll just jump right into the tax implications. Again, we're using our $450,000. By the way, I'll just note there, if you look at, you'll notice on each of these figures that footnote number 1 says tax requisition amount excludes 5.25% survey of taxes fees. We take that out of all of our services because we're going to get to the point where every service has kind of a different well, let me back up a second. When we go into if the group goes into some kind of further study looking at incorporation, we want to be able to compare apples and apples rather than apples and oranges. So we take out from every service, but we list it here, we take out that 5.25%. And we then bring those together under administration. And then if we get to the point of looking at actual costs within a defined boundary for potential municipality, we then compare that to administration costs for that. So then we're left, when we take it out of here, we're left with the true cost of the service minus that tax collection cost. And we compare it to the true cost of the service under the municipality. And then we look at the municipal administration cost and we look at our administration costs as it relates to this 5.25% survey of taxes fees. So we like to take it out so that we get that apples and apples. Anyway, when we look at regional parks and trails, we've got a very small amount because regional parks and trails tend to be more kind of passive types of opportunities for people to recreate in a very passive way. Connect with nature, those kinds of things. So not a lot of ongoing expenses on operations, some, but not a lot. The other types of recreation, much more focused, much more intensive in terms of the labor required, in terms of the attention required. So we see a much higher fee of $223 for a representative house. And that's not uncommon when we look across not only electoral areas, but municipalities as well. Parks and recreation tend to be one of the higher costs, if not the highest cost item in many places. Okay, let's look ahead to incorporation impact. So the municipality could provide its own parks and recreation service. We've got a few different kind of ideas here, and they're listed on the final page of the fact sheet in here. So if we can say, first of all, with respect to the regional park, there would be no change. That would stay as a regional service under incorporation. If we looked then at the local park service, the Okanagan Falls Parks Recreation Facilities, or programming and recreation facilities. In that particular one there, we could have the service provided by the municipality. We could do that using its own kind of, and have it focused there. We could also, though, have the RDOS continue to provide the service both to the municipality and to the electoral area. And decisions then would be made at the regional table by kind of the participating jurisdictions as they relate, the decisions as they relate to the operation of the service. We could also continue to have a commission in place to guide some of the decision making. Or we could have the municipality provide the service to its residents as well as to a defined area outside of the municipality. That's not, again, uncommon in some places. There is authority, go back to that authority term that Ron talked about earlier, under the community charter for a municipality to provide services outside of its jurisdiction to an electoral area, or in fact to another municipality if you wanted, with the consent of the regional district. And in doing that, then the municipality through the regional district can collect contributions to that service. So the municipality could take over responsibility for providing that service as a municipal service, have benefiting parts of the regional district of the remainder of Electoral Area D pay into that service, or the municipality could simply provide it on its own, not provide it to outside of the area. The difficulty with that, of course, is that when we deal with parks and recreation facilities, we can't really deny entry to those. And so if we don't find a way to include full benefiting areas in those services, we get what are called free rider problems. So I would suspect that in a municipal setting, the municipality would want to find a way, either by providing it through the regional district or probably by providing it locally as a municipality, would want to find a way to get a contribution from the benefiting parts of the electoral area to that service in order to keep the costs close to what they are today. And we did talk already about the regional parks and trails service. Okay, let's pause there. Any questions or comments on parks and recreation, a very important area of service? Okay, let's start with Phyllis and then we'll go to Ron.
I just have a question. Looks like there's lots of options for us. I'm just wondering, if we take this, if we had decided to move forward with the incorporation, how would we deal with the insurance for different recreation opportunities or use of like jumping off the trestle bridge, this sort of thing?
Yeah, very good question. And so every municipality in BC and every regional district for that matter. And Jim, is RDOS part of MIA?
Yes, we are.
Okay, great, thank you. So there is an organization in British Columbia called the Municipal Insurance Association of BC, and its mandate is to provide insurance to municipalities and regional districts, to local governments. So you can get that insurance for those kinds of things through the MIA. You can also buy other insurance separately. So the same kinds of considerations that a municipality would face, or let's put it differently, the same considerations the regional district faces in acquiring insurance for those facilities and for those potential, to cover off those potential risks, a municipality would face as well. We wouldn't expect really any change in cost there, because now the regional district would have more of a background with MIA, so it's got more of a record, and kind of history tends to kind of influence the cost of the policies, and they can kind of influence in a good way or a bad way. But the municipality would be welcomed into the MIA family, as it were, and benefit from some very competitive insurance policies. Does that answer that, Phyllis? Oh, have I got you there, Phyllis?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Ron.
Thank you. And 2 points. First, on MIA.
Yes, I think so. I mean, if it looks like it's something that would be, it wasn't going to be such a big cost, to us, is something that is comparable with what we're dealing now, it seems reasonable. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So I think we had a bit of a delay there. Sorry. Go ahead, Ron.
Yes, and yeah, Phyllis, if you can hear me, my understanding of how MIA BC works, Municipal Insurance Association of BC, and we had Thomas Barnes and Sherman Chow, the claim director of claims, and Thomas Barnes is the CEO. He's a reform lawyer. He's been there about 19 years now. And he spoke at our board table on June 6, 2019. And I put this question to him as well at that time. And the simple answer is they do a great job. It's an incredibly good insurance coverage, $10,000 deductible. That's not going to change. The premium would likely be the same, but what could change over time is you do get a 10% surcharge on a bad claims record and a 10% discount on a good claims record. That's basically it. So what could happen is we could actually end up with a better premium compared to the regional district, which may not have as good an experience as we would have managing our claims experience, because I am familiar with where the claims are at the RDOS and what some of that history is. And I know it's not us, so I can speak firsthand to what would impact our claim history. I could talk in more detail another time with you, Phyllis, about the Trestle Bridge, but the short story is I agree with Alan 100%. It would not have a material impact. It should have no impact. None whatsoever. And this is a big deal because it's very good insurance. And so if you had a service taken over, for example, the irrigation district or an improvement district or one of the water utilities or the wastewater treatment utility in Heritage Hills, that insurance would apply to all of those. All of those services would be covered. And that's a big benefit. And they also provide insurance for vehicles and other things as well, not just liability. So it's a very interesting service. My second point, and I just wanted to help, I hope I can help clarify what Alan said earlier about the 5.25% fee for tax collection. The distinguishing variable there is municipalities don't pay it. Regional districts do. It's something that our board has discussed. In fact, I think we had a UBCM motion this year, Union BC Municipality Convention motion, asking for that to be withdrawn because we in the electoral areas feel like we may be getting an unfair cost. But right now, if we incorporate, the cost impact on that one line item is about $138,000 less than we pay today. So that's $138,000 more to this community on incorporation. And there's another similar thing is utility franchise fee, which we would also get, which we don't get now because we're not a municipality. And I want to say a very special thank you to Jim Zaffino, because what I know, I learned from him. I did not know this before I met him. He's brilliant. And trust me, he knows a lot about this stuff, a lot more than maybe anybody else I've ever met. So we're very lucky to have him in our group. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Eleanor. Oh, we'll take you off mute there.
Got it.
There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Alan. It's not a question, and I know Bob Daly is not going to agree with me, but the comment about Centennial Park in Okanagan Falls is owned and operated by the Okanagan Falls Irrigation District. I do not agree that it is owned by the irrigation district. It is owned by the community and it is operated by the irrigation district. And I believe that way back in the day, at the time Centennial Park was given to the community by the Okanagan Falls Women's Institute, that was their clear understanding. So whether it's changed over a period of time or not, I don't know, but I would prefer that that wording was changed, and you can argue with me if you want, Bob. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eleanor. Okay, any other comments then? And I appreciate that very much for that comment. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to the incorporation insight. And as Sherry will tell us in this one, and forgive me, Sherry, if I'm kind of taking your opening line here, but as Sherry will tell us on this one, we're kind of jumping ahead here, and it may sound a little bit presumptuous at first, but Sherry's put in a very helpful kind of opening text box there with the purpose of the paper. I'll kind of, with that little bit of stage set, I'll pass it over to Sherry.
Thank you, Alan. Yes, I was going to start with that, but I will anyway. We did just want to highlight the fact that sort of why are we outlining the incorporation study process when that is not the process we are in yet. We're working on sort of a precursor study, and we just want to make it clear that we aren't meaning to presume that we will ever even get to this point, because there are certainly that decision has not been made. However, the purpose is really to provide this information for everyone to appreciate what the process is and what it involves. Not necessarily because we know we're going there, but that we may end up there one day, and it's good to understand what would be involved if we did. So this paper is intended to go through what an incorporation study is, how it's initiated, what it involves, what the incorporation study committee does, what the meat of the incorporation study includes, and what the roles are of various, the community, the province, the regional district, and just sort of encapsulate the entire process. So how is it initiated? And you'll see in this paper, there's the acronym MUNI, which actually refers to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. And as David knows, I try to call it the MMA because that makes more sense to me. But I think the whole mixed martial arts reference, although I think it makes them sound much tougher than they are. Yeah, so that's what the Municipal Affairs Ministry is known as MUNI. So when you see that, that's what that is. So they are responsible for handling requests for incorporation studies and even the precursors to that. So working with regional districts to identify, like we are in now, governance issues, service issues, and help consider solutions that might be appropriate to that. If incorporation is indeed sort of the outcome of some of these precursor restructure studies, if that's seen as a desirable option by some of the communities within the regional district, and if the regional district's board agrees, then the regional district will then contact the Ministry of Municipal Affairs to initiate an incorporation study. This paper outlines sort of what that 5-step process is, and we've already sort of discussed this because we've been going through that graphic as well. But the communities contact the ministry works together with them, maybe sometimes comes and meets with the community to talk about what to expect. And together the local government and the Municipal Affairs Ministry will establish a terms of reference for the incorporation study. They'll then create the incorporation study committee, which will then initiate a proposal call, select a consultant to do the study, and then really the analysis and the main sort of study, the meat of the study gets underway. Once the analysis is prepared, then, and also during that analysis preparation, the community consultation and engagement, which is really a very critical component of an incorporation study. It's very important that they get the information out and that the information is accurate and everyone has an opportunity to understand it. And then after that process, the committee then is responsible for deciding whether to recommend that the ministry hold a referendum. So the committee makes a recommendation to the regional district, and then the regional district would then make that request of the ministry to hold a referendum. Referendum would be held, and if the vote passes, then incorporation, the whole implementation process begins. So that outlines that. You'll see in the Incorporation Insight very familiar graphic. I'm glad I picked the one that we actually decided to go with, so that's good. How is an incorporation study committee created? Very similar to how your own committee was created. It is created as an oversight body, so much like yours. There's a lot of emphasis on that body being neutral. They're really intended to be there sort of to oversee the process, but also to act as a conduit for providing information to the public. And they, of course, have that role of recommending whether or not to hold a referendum at the end of the process. What components are part of the incorporation study? So the comparative analysis is sort of a key aspect, and Alan touched on this earlier when he was talking about what happens when you're in an incorporation study. So you'll have your incorporation study boundary, and for that boundary, you will look at the analysis of what those same services. So you'll go through a similar process to what our fact sheets look like, but at the end of the day, you'll have information that says, this is what this service looks like now under the regional district system. And here's what that service looks like in a municipal system if you were to incorporate, and here's what the impacts would be on costs for that. So you can actually sort of compare as much as the information you have. Now, of course, there's always the, once incorporated, a council has authority to do things like raise taxes, lower taxes, those kind of things. But all things being equal, if the service was the same, the service level was the same, here are the impacts that we would expect for this incorporation study area. And that's what the analysis looks like in that study. It also prepares a multi-year operating budget. It will look at what the, oh, sorry, I did skip a step there. There also goes through the implementation of incorporation. So what would it look like? And there's always a provincial offer that is part of that process. So there will be restructure assistance grants. Sometimes there's funding for specific initiatives as part of it. The transfer of roads usually comes with a defined period of time when the province will agree to continue to maintain those roads, even though they've transferred them over to the new municipality. So they're all aspects of the implementation of incorporation, and those details are brought forward in a provincial offer of assistance, and that is part of the analysis and part of the incorporation study. We also prepare a multi-year operating budget as part of an incorporation study. So we show what the likely costs of operating that municipality would be, and we are required to prepare that operating budget needs to extend beyond the terms of the provincial assistance. So if the province is offering to maintain roads for a period of 5 years, then the multi-year operating budget needs to extend 6 or 7 years. It needs to go beyond when the provincial assistance ends. There's always property tax notices. So what are the property tax implications? There's usually some sample notices. There'll be residential ones as well as business taxes. Community engagement, again, this is a really key part of that process. So it's usually quite comprehensive. There are lots of meetings. There are lots of different ways to engage in the process, whether it be online, in-person meetings are a key part of it. Yeah, there's reading materials, there's presentations, it's really a big effort to try and get out to all of the people in the incorporation study area to, again, provide them with that opportunity. And then there's a final report that summarizes the study analysis as well as the public engagement process and the findings from that. That gets submitted to both the regional district as well as the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. So in that, the role of the community, again, is to become engaged with the process. All the meetings that the study committee holds are open to the public, but also, again, there are a lot of events usually created to help engage them and help give opportunities for them to learn about the study. The role of the province, the most obvious one is through the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. That is who's engaged throughout the process. They're the ones that provide the grants and they attend the meetings, just like David is now. But there's always a representative that's doing the same throughout the meetings for an incorporation study. They're working together with the regional district, but there are also several other ministries that get involved in the analysis and providing information and input to the process. So the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure is a big one because, again, when you incorporate, the local roads are transferred over to the municipality. So an inventory of those roads, the condition of those roads, those are all really important factors, the costs for maintaining those roads. So there are a lot of important inputs from the Ministry of Transportation. Ministry of Public Safety and Solicitor General. Again, they are responsible for policing in rural areas. So they have some input into the process and they provide information about what might happen under incorporation. And also the Ministry of Finance, because they do administer the property tax system in rural areas. So there are some changes, of course, in incorporation. So they're involved in helping to calculate some of those. The role of the regional district, again, they're involved in the study as well, often providing support the same way as the regional district is for this level of study. The electoral area director usually sits again on the study committee as an ex officio member, but is also actively engaged with the process as Ron is engaged in this process. The last part of this paper just comments on what happens if the committee does not recommend a referendum. So we just wanted to sum up that it doesn't always end up here. So if an incorporation study goes through that process and the study committee does not recommend that incorporation proceed to a referendum vote, then the regional district and the board of directors doesn't ask the municipal affairs ministry to hold an incorporation vote. So really, it's the end of the process. It's kind of the same as where we are in this process. If your committee doesn't recommend that we even proceed to incorporation study, then it's likely that the regional district, based on that recommendation from the study committee, wouldn't proceed any further. So it's the same sort of process that is part of the incorporation study process. And I'm running
Great,
out
thank
of,
you very much, Sherry.
I'm running out of
That's great.
voice.
Yes. Well, you
Excuse me.
made it right to the end there, just on time. Perfect. Any questions or observations or thoughts on this kind of incorporation study process? And again, the idea being that this would be a process that that would be considered depending on the outcome of this particular study and later in the overall restructure process that the province would entertain. Okay, I think we're seeing that we're getting close. It's 10 to 8. So Mr. Chair, I'm going to Sherry, I believe we have one more item there, which I'll just get you to quickly speak to,
Sure.
and then we'll pass it over to the chair.
Sure, perfect. Thank you. I just wanted to touch on this because I know last time we talked about the idea of being able to bring forward maybe an article in advance of the next edition, so we aren't sort of always behind the gun, and we can share the ads before they're published. And what I thought I would do is, even though we don't have anything written necessarily for the next one, is maybe just come up with a list of topics for the next 3, and then we can work on what the content of those would be. But Alan, can you just, the 3 ideas that I had for one was potentially putting the process graphic in the November edition. So again, if we want any tweaks to that graphic that we talked about earlier, and Mylene, you're probably thinking, wait, that graphic doesn't fit in my little ad space that we've created, but maybe we can chat about that. So having some sort of process graphic was my thought for November edition. Once we get to the December edition, we will be wrapping up our fact sheets and working on an overview mail out that will go out at the end of the year, so the end of December. So I think if we can prompt people to watch for that and sort of maybe give them a hint of sort of what the content would be. And then in the January edition, maybe we can highlight our community meeting dates and times. So if everyone's sort of okay with those topic areas, or if they have any other input on something else they might like to see.
As chair, I'm just going to make a quick suggestion, and given that it's 10 to 8, I'm not going to suggest that we discuss this at length. We can bring it back. I think this is a great plan for going forward. I really like the idea of getting ahead of things. Yeah. Once we get into January, February, March, when we're trying to be more interactive and trying to engage and connect with people and get them coming out to open houses or workshops, I think we might want to look at shifting to something more like an article, or as well as either or as well as this box, which might start setting out, what the dates are, etc. Anyway, okay. We can discuss that later.
Sounds good. That's all I have. Yeah, unless anyone else had, the only other input I was hoping is if anyone has any other thoughts that 450 is the wrong number to be using, and if there's something else that they would like to be using, then please speak up. Otherwise, we will continue to use that 450 figure.
Okay, Ron, quick comment.
Yeah, thank you. And just for the benefit of everybody who is attending, got some good news today. We have an 85-inch smart board that's been delivered. It's at the Martin Street office. It's going to be deployed in our club room. It'll be mobile. It has video conferencing capability, mics, speakers. It can be moved to the gym. So for public meetings, this is a technology that the consultants and staff are welcome to use in the committee. And I just wanted to bring it to your attention, because if things go well, it would sure be nice to have people attend, some of those meetings in person. With now that thing can't travel too far, but it's in that gymnasium and in that club room. And for all the meetings that we have, anybody who wants to participate on the computer from their home can participate, and there can be people present in that amenity. So COVID rules permitting, I'm hoping that is something that will be of a big benefit to the consultants and to the staff and to the committee. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ron. Any other comments or questions? Phyllis.
I was just saying, my comment at the beginning of the meeting was about the fact sheet and incorporates inside schedule of what talked about what services were received in what area. And I would like to have an opportunity to talk to the consultants about that, not now, because I think the meeting's been quite a long meeting, but I would like to talk to them in the near future about that.
I think your sensitivity towards people's level of tiredness is astute. Way to go. Okay, can we bring that forward for the next meeting as well?
Yep.
Okay.
So Sherry, I could talk to you tomorrow if you want, or
Sure.
maybe okay.
Yeah. If you have my email, just send me an email. We'll set up a time. That'd be great.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Right. Any other comments or questions relative to the content that was provided? And I think it was detailed. I think it was pretty complete. And I think it gives anyone who takes the time to read it a pretty thorough overview of any one of the individual services. I'm wondering if anyone has any other comments they'd like to make before we move on. Okay, Mylene, go ahead.
I just noticed that the incorrect logo is used throughout. It should be the logo with double quotations around the D. I'm just sending that logo to everybody now so that we make sure we use that correct one as per Christie's request.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Any other comments relative to the content that we've seen here? Okay. Well, look, folks, I think we gave, we've had some pretty heart-searching discussions relative to cost and whether we're going into it in enough detail. Just whether the work plan was going to get to the issues we want to deal with. And I think our consultants need to know that we're comfortable, ideally more than comfortable, and very satisfied with, the work that we're seeing to date. And, from my perspective, I think I would certainly welcome a vote of confidence for the content that's been provided, and whether this appears to be heading in the right direction or not. Okay, I don't know whether these are people raising their hands for comment or, all right, Ron, it's going to need to be fairly short.
I'd like to bring
Of course, Chair. I think Bob Daly wants to go first, Matt. Maybe let him go.
Yes, thank you. Ron, if you would entertain a motion that the Services and Boundary Configuration Study Committee endorse the work and strategies of the consultants.
Okay, well, that's a motion that's being made. Does anybody want to second that? I think we're just looking for, a general indication of support here. Okay, Phyllis is seconding it. Okay, now we've got some conversation.
Yeah, and thank
Ron.
you, Matt. I'll just finish my comment. All I was going to say is I'm not allowed to vote, but I agree with you 100%, Matt. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. That's good. We like to hear that. Thank you. Any other comments or questions on this motion? Okay, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor, please indicate or say aye. Okay, thank you. Any dissent? Any abstain? Well, I'll work that as strong positive endorsement. Okay, we're at that point where we would take questions from the floor or general public. John, I guess technically you could squeak in there, but I don't think I'm going to give you that latitude tonight. Are there any other comments or questions before I take a motion to adjourn here? Okay, folks, long meeting. I'm sure some of you may have some additional comments or questions. Anyone who's got some more detailed or specific edits that they'd like to share with Ellen or
Sherry.
mind blank. I'm Sherry.
Sherry.
Sherry, yeah, you're good. You're good. Please send them by email. I'd welcome seeing them as well myself. Thank you very much, folks. We'll see you a month from now.
Bye.
Good night. Thank you.